Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the BettingPros podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Viola, and we have a fantastic show for you today. We're going to be breaking down some NASCAR. We got the M&M's Fan Appreciation 400 coming up. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking a little macro, and we're going to be talking about some sports betting in general because we have one of the absolute best bettors I know on with us today. Joining us, he is also bassist for the band The White Stripes, Zach White.
Hey, how's it going? I appreciate you having me.
I am really glad to have you on, Zach. Thank you so much for your time. Obviously not actually the bassist for White Stripes, but a very, very incredibly accomplished gambler. And before we get into the NASCAR, I want to talk to you a little bit about that history. What was it like coming into the sports betting world? Because you really were kind of on the cutting edge before everything that we have seen balloon in the last several years.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly haven't been in it as long as a lot of people, but for 15, 16 years or so, basically since I was 21, the landscape has definitely changed a ton since, like what you're talking about. I mean, the last 3 years, ever since the New Jersey thing and all the states started coming online, it's a whole different ballgame now. But, it's still a lot of fun. There's still a lot of fun times to be had. It's a good, I like it. I think it's a good thing that the way it's expanded, it created a lot of opportunity. There's some things, I still don't like, but it's a lot of fun still. There's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of good times to be had.
And you've certainly been one of those guys who's had a lot of those great times. But what are some of those things that you think have been some of the flaws and the issues that we've kind of been butting into, especially as of late, because you've seen the industry kind of change over the last 16 years. What are some of the ways you think it's changed for the worse?
I mean, it's no secret that everybody's complaining about the same type of things. And it's, a lot of these bigger companies that came into the scene are just operating in a very poor fashion, and not optimal fashion. And they're not being fair about a lot of things. And they're doing some questionable marketing and some questionable tactics that a lot of older school bookmakers would have never considered doing or never considered acceptable. And I think it's just a product mostly of putting people in charge that aren't qualified, that don't know how to run a sports book in the most efficient, the most profitable way. And they're kind of just taking the easy way out, and it's to the detriment of the sports betting community as a whole.
And what are some of those practices that bettors who are maybe just getting into it or who are trying to better themselves and don't know necessarily what to watch out for? What are some of those things that you'd say that they should keep an eye out for?
Well, for a fresh sports bettor, you're probably not going to encounter a lot of the stuff that, veteran or sharp sports bettors or big sports bettors are going to run into, like the severe limiting, the bans, but one of the ugliest things that I think happens, is the marketing tactics where these sports books are pushing out their absolute products that are the absolute worst for the consumer, that have the highest house edges, that have rules that are written very unfairly, that are not in line with industry standards. And it's just it puts a sour taste in a lot of gamblers' mouths that have been doing it for a long time and know it shouldn't be done that way. So you're kind of saying, I'm going to entice this new player in, but I'm going to give them the absolute worst of it. And then, it's not good for the industry.
Exactly. Some of these house edges can be really tough because if you're a new bettor just coming into it, you don't necessarily spot some of those. You don't see a line that's juiced at a completely ridiculous rate. Or you can even see with some of these sports books, it's minus 125 each way on a spread. And that's a criminal amount of juice, but someone who's just coming in and maybe doesn't know what they're doing just yet. And that's
right.
completely okay. It's completely okay. We were all new at this at some point. I'm certainly a lot newer at it than you are. And they might just not notice something like that. And some of these books are taking advantage of that. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. And the ultimate hope is that as sports betting continues to grow and expand in the United States, that the more competent operators can compete on the pricing level and the fairness level and the value to the individual gambler, and the write more action at a smaller house edge and still make a really good profit for the company. But you're not killing that new sports bettor immediately by just fleecing his entire bankroll in the first month, or coming up with some weird rule change halfway through the baseball season where it's going to really turn that person off from doing business or even maybe betting at all anymore. because of how they were treated the first few times they came and bet with a new company or something. So, I'm hoping we see more of the Circas of the world and the Westgates of the world, keep expanding and growing and putting that opportunity to compete on a pricing level and a fairness level for everybody.
Exactly. I mean, that's what we all want. We want this business to grow and grow in the right way. I mean, yeah, it is all about money changing hands, and obviously the books want your money, but there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. I'm completely with you on that. Guys, real quick, remember when you're looking for free picks and sports betting advice, bettingpros.com has you covered with tips from over 150 experts to make it easy for you to cash out. Download the app to get sports betting alerts. You'll get notified of favorable bets based on line movements, consensus picks from the most accurate experts, and vetted systems in play. Betting Pros monitors all of the major sports books, most accurate experts, and top systems to identify the best betting opportunities. So download today in the Apple or Google Play stores. But right now, let's shift over to something a little more positive here, because we have a great NASCAR race coming up this weekend. And, this season has been an interesting one. We, of course, saw Christopher Bell taking his first checkered flag last week. Is there anyone that you're looking at here up at the top of the board? We've got Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, and Denny Hamlin. They're with Chase Elliott as the top four favorites here. DraftKings has Busch at 7-1, the other three at 8-1. Is there anyone that you maybe have your eye on right now for this week?
Well, you can't mention Pocono without Denny Hamlin. It's his average finish there is he's raced there a ton too. He's been doing it a long time, and I think he's got like an average finish of 10th or something, and it's just super high. He's also been pretty good at the downforce tracks this year in the next gen car. So I guess the last one you look back on is Nashville, and I think did he win? He led a whole bunch of laps there, I think, and it's just it's his track, and I think we're going to see some shifting, and it'll be the first time the new car has been on a non super speedway track of this distance. But it should be a good race. I would definitely keep an eye and consider some Denny Hamlin at 8 or 9 or so if you can find something like that. I mean, it certainly seems like a fair price to me considering his history at the track and how he's been so far this year at the downforce tracks.
And you talk about that, the downforce tracks, things like that. For maybe someone who is new to NASCAR, certainly guilty. I'm not going to pretend to be an aficionado on the sport. But what is it that makes each race different? Like, how do you judge a course versus a driver versus the field?
Yeah, you can kind of split all the tracks that they race on, 36 races a year, into 4 or 5 different categories. You have your super speedways, your Daytona, your Talladegas. These are very long, high bank tracks. And you can throw Atlanta in that category now because since the repave there, they're using the same restrictor plate. I know it's not called that anymore, tapered space or whatever. They're limiting the horsepower of the engine basically to keep the cars from going 250 miles an hour, which would be a very dangerous speed. So those 3 tracks are a completely different ballgame because of the way the car and the engine is throttled, and so the cars kind of race in a tighter pack there. There's a lot of group tightly bunched racing, and that sets them apart from your other tracks, which I would call downforce tracks for the most part. These are your Charlottes, your Atlantas, your Michigan, Pocono, stuff where aero makes a lot of difference because the car is going 200 miles an hour. Drafting makes a lot of difference at these tracks. And so those would be your downforce tracks. Anything from basically like Darlington size up, a mile and a half, a mile and a third, something like that. So then the next would be like a road course, and there's a ton of them on the schedule this year. It used to be there was just 2 road courses a year for years and years, but then NASCAR realized that they were pretty popular with the fans, or becoming more popular with the fans, and so those are completely different because you're turning left and right. You might have elevation changes. You might be going anywhere from 30 miles an hour to 110, 120 miles an hour at these tracks. So that's a completely different ballgame that requires a completely different skill set from the driver. So you see standouts for those category races where somebody who's like a road course specialist or just particularly talented excels at those type of tracks. And then you have the short tracks or the tracks that are flat, like Loudon, we just left there, New Hampshire. Your Dovers, your Bristols, your your Martinsvilles. So these are tracks where the car is running wide open, but it can only go so fast because the distance is short. The banking might not be as extreme. So there's a segment of drivers that are just really good at short track racing too.
Yeah, I certainly know. My dad actually used to race a little bit of short track, but on motorcycles. I've been out to some of those. They can be exciting events. It's very different in that world versus the short track racing with four wheels, but still a lot of fun either way. I encourage anyone to get out there and check one of these races out. They are so much fun to go to. Do you love sports betting as much as Calvin Ridley? Are you willing to stake your career on it? Well, here's your chance to win a signed Calvin Ridley Atlanta Falcons jersey, courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction. Subscribe to the Betting Pros YouTube channel right now. Comment below this video, and that's it. We will be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and claim your prize. It's not just that you can bet on the winner. They've obviously expanded the betting menu on NASCAR so much over the years. There's all sorts of props and different things that you can throw in. And one of those is matchups. You can bet either head-to-head or groups of four, right?
That's right, yeah. Matchups, are probably the second most popular way to bet a NASCAR race, just behind who's going to win. So for years and decades the decade or so that I've been betting it, that was pretty much the two major ways to bet NASCAR. You can bet who's going to win the race. Every now and then somebody might put up who's going to be in the top three, and then head-to-head matchups. So usually there's a rotation that comes out of 50 or so different matchups each week, and then some unique independent sports books would create their own. Or then you'd have like the group where you're picking the highest finishing driver out of a group of 4 or 5 people. And then, as the menus have expanded at some of these newer sports books, you have started to see some more props, like, which manufacturer will win, who will be leading at the end of stage one, how many cautions there'll be, what will be the average speed of the race, and, how many people will finish on the lead lap, that type of thing, proposition style bets.
And so with betting on NASCAR, it is so much different than trying to bet on another sport, because you're not just betting on humans here. There's so much machinery involved. How is it that NASCAR really differs from betting on other sports? Like, how do you take into account things like driver ability, car quality, et cetera, while you're handicapping something like this?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, 100%. There's a lot of machine versus man type handicapping, and I think this year in particular with the next gen car, the machine segment of it definitely got tightened up a little bit. So the difference of what the ability of a Hendrick Motorsports machine in the past versus a bottom tier team, their machine was capable of was, it might have been a difference of several horsepower, a couple miles per hour when you're talking about on the track. So, the teams that didn't have the budget of Hendrick Motorsports didn't have a chance to really compete in years past. But that all kind of changed this year with the next gen car, with a lot of parts and pieces that are regulated by NASCAR very strictly, or even provided by the exact same source to these different teams. So the car that a team in the past, has now is almost as good as a Hendrick Motorsports car or a Joe Gibbs car. So that has made for a lot of exciting racing this year, I think. I mean, we're obviously at 14 different winners so far in the season, which is pretty impressive compared to years past where you just saw dominance from a couple of particular teams.
Yeah, I mean, you saw Kyle Larson just kept reeling off victory after victory last season. It's been fun to see how many different racers have been able to actually pull out a win. And, I mean, parity is better in all sports. And it also can create some real value when it comes to gambling, too. You're not going to just be stuck with some heavy favorites with low numbers here. You're going to be able to find more of that value. And that's really what you're looking for in these races. I know you particularly, it's all about finding that best possible number. How is it that you're able to look at some of these? You talked about Denny Hamlin at 8-1 being a fair price. What is that calculation that goes like that? You basically look at a number and say, I have value here. Like I have some sort of edge here.
Yeah. I mean, you're in a lot of instances, early in the week when you don't have a lot of information about what particular chassis a team might be bringing or how they unloaded, you're kind of, just eyeballing stuff early in the week. You're saying, well, this is my best guess about what kind of car this team is going to bring, how they're going to perform at this track. So like, you mentioned that Denny example, and I'm not saying that Denny at 8-1 is a great bet. And a lot of times these odds to win markets have a pretty big house edge. So you got to find something pretty substantial to bet it, midweek or so. But yeah, a lot of things you're looking at. You're making your best guess about how what type of car and how fast they're going to be running this week, and you're looking at how this driver has performed at these type of tracks in the past. You're making guesses about, are they going to qualify? Is he going to be able to select a pretty decent pit box? Did they lose personnel last week? Did they get a penalty? Are they in desperation mode? Are we coming up on the cutoff? Like, how is this driver going to be feeling the pressure, this particular week? So, it's a lot of different things. Obviously, I can't say all the secrets, currently, but, there's a lot of different angles to look at as far as picking out value on an outright market.
Yeah, I feel like that's always the biggest question. It's and so much of it is just a matter of experience and having been there for long enough that it just kind of becomes that innate thing. I know we've certainly both talked with our friend and friend of the show, Aaron Kessler, about just being able to look at a line and say, that's off. There's so much of it that maybe there is math involved, but it is also that gut feeling of you just know it because you've been there for so long that you can kind of see it. And it's about developing some of that experience. But with NASCAR in particular, how is it that it's changed? How have you watched this sport change and how you bet it over the past decade?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Kessler because I was just talking to him a few days ago when I was out in Vegas. And, there was one point earlier in this year where Kyle Larson was like 8 plus 850 to win a race. And I was like, I'm not sure that there's a race on the circuit that I wouldn't bet. I wasn't like Daytona or something that I wouldn't bet Larson at 8-1. But that was a while back when we had that conversation the first time. And then I was like, well, the way things have shaked out this year, you're just not seeing that dominance from a particular team or a particular driver anymore. So the way things have changed, to get back to your question, is, this year there's been a tremendous amount of change. All those changes with the generation of car has obviously made a big difference. And the amount of information that's out there, as far from a gambling perspective, is a lot more in the past few years too than what it was 10 or 15 years ago when I first started. In the mid 2000s, when you're looking at how to gauge how fast the driver was going to be or how good a team was going to be a particular week, you might not have but a few little tidbits of data to go off. It's like where he ran at a similar track earlier this year. Is he going to be bringing that same car back? Is the track surface the same? Are we going to expect the same type of tire wear and the same, performance from this driver at this new track? And then that might be all you had. Come Friday or Saturday, you see a qualifying number, you see a highest practice number, but that wasn't worth all that much. A few years later, they changed the way the information got distributed, so you could watch practice. It started being on TV more. You could get like an average speed of how fast somebody was over a 10-lap average during practice. And for years, there was 2 or maybe even 3 practice sessions each weekend, so you had a lot of data to look at. And then I guess it was in the early 2010, 2012 where I started realizing, well, this information's out there. I don't need just an average. What if I get every single lap time, every single time they turn the lap on the track in practice? Like, maybe there's a way for me to get that. And sure enough, with a little programming experience, you can extract that information. There was one point where before it was available on the internet, I was joking with some of my partners. I was like, we should just send somebody down to the track every week and look over the truck series guys' shoulders, because they all have monitors that show everybody's speed and a lot of different data points. And how much would it cost for me to sponsor this truck series team or this Xfinity series team for a season? But they let me, in exchange, they let me have access to some of the stuff that's just not widely available. So now, like as gambling progresses and the years go on and more people have access to the same information, you kind of have to change your tactics. Everybody knows about the average practice speed now, so including the guy who's setting the line. So there's just really not much value to be extracted from that anymore. So you have to kind of look for other little tidbits here and there to try to figure out just a little bit better guess about how somebody's going to do than what the bookmakers and what your competition as a professional bettor has.
Want to track all of your wagers in one place? Check out the Betting Pros Pick Tracker at bettingpros.com/pick tracking. It syncs up with your sports books to tally which picks hit, which miss, and gives you a live look at what the public is doing, so you can use real-time tracking to determine which plays to make and which to fade. Get on the leaderboard and quickly become a sharp by using the free advice we offer at bettingpros.com/pick tracking. Yeah, it is true. We are in the information age, and you're able to get so much of it now. And you talked about that. The information being widely available is great for bettors because you can make a more informed bet. But the flip side is the books have that same information, and they're able to use that when they're setting the lines. And it's made lines a lot tighter, right?
Sure. And that's not NASCAR specific. That's any sport.
Yeah.
If you're not improving your handicapping every single year, or maybe even in the middle of the season, then you're not going to win using the same tactics year after year. You have to do something to continually stay a little bit ahead of the bookmakers and a little bit ahead of your betting competition.
And another thing that I want to get to with you, long shots, because we talked about some of the favorites. We talked about Hamlin being up there at the top, but I mean, you look at some of these riders. I mean, yeah, Ty Dillon and BJ McLeod down here at 1,000-1. You're not necessarily looking on betting them, but how do you look at a racer, and where do you start drawing the line on some of these guys that are a little further down the field? Like you got Chase Briscoe at 30-1, Suarez at 30-1. I'm not necessarily throwing them out as potential winners for this race. I'm just saying there's a wide range of options here once you get down into some of these numbers where you're still getting a pretty high payout on some of these guys. Kurt Busch 20-1. You know what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
How do you draw the line on long shots where you're saying there's some value here?
I mean, I think that this year has proven that there's, you're really way down in the field before you say, well, this person does not have a chance at all. I mean, in years past, you could knock off half the field immediately because, well, their equipment sucks, or they're going to be driving at 2 miles an hour slower than the leaders, and they're going to be trapped a lap down immediately. So it would be like a miracle for them to pull something off. And then the very bottom of the tier, the last 10 teams, most of them wouldn't even bring enough tires, to the track to complete the whole race. They just didn't plan on. They were starting in parking or something similar, where they were just there running some sponsorship time, getting a little bit of the purse, and then going on to the next race. They knew that they didn't have a chance to win. In 2022, I think there's only a handful of teams that don't have any shot at all to win. And then at some races like Atlanta or Daytona or Talladega, maybe they do have a shot to win. Maybe that Todd Gilliland or somebody like that is able to maintain speed, be on the lead lap, and make a move at the end of a Daytona and win. So this year, when we were at the beginning of the season, when you're looking at futures and stuff, I mean, I was able to pick off a couple of good things, but I really missed out on some big value on these teams like Trackhouse in 2311, which had drivers in the 100 to 200 to 1 range, and then they've all won races this year, so they're in the playoffs. So now they're 20 or 30 to 1, and I had an idea that the teams were going to tighten up as far as the difference of the equipment, and how everybody's pretty much starting with the same chassis, the same engine now. That we would see some new drivers win a race, but I just did not expect it to be exactly to the extreme that it has been this year with 14 different winners.
All right, my last question for you: is there anyone here for the Poconos that you're looking at in that maybe mid to long shot category? Anyone that we can give out on the show here?
To tell you the truth, man, like I'm actually going up to Virginia tomorrow to bet, and I haven't looked that closely at it yet, and I was planning on doing that later today. But I don't have one for you. I did like when you said Briscoe 30. That's one of my drivers that I'm pretty high on this year. He had the success with the win early in the season, and it's kind of not had the runs as good lately. But he is a guy I've had my eye on. I think he's a talented driver, especially when you deal with shifting on some of these tracks, and I think they will be shifting over the tunnel turn at Pocono, if not every turn. So you got a guy like him who's a pretty great driver, and a shifting driver, and there could be some value there at 30 to 1.
All right, Zach, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate the time. Where can people find you all around the internet and what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of go in waves of my activity on the social media and stuff, but you can find me on @GambleBalls on Twitter. That's probably the best place to find me.
And if anyone wanted to stop by in the Carolinas and get a nice, refreshing adult beverage, where should they go?
You can find me here on the coast of North Carolina. It's a little town north of Wilmington called Surf City, and I have a brewery and tap room here, and a private event space, which is where I'm hanging out right now, trying to avoid the noise, which hasn't worked out very good. But yeah, come by and see me.
All right.
Line Kolsch for you.
Oh, there we go. Oh, man, I need to get myself a beer. You're a little ahead of me on the time right now, but I'll be catching up to you in a bit, my friend. Thank you again so much. Guys, once again, you can follow them @GambleBalls on Twitter. Find me @TV at Work. Thank you so much for checking in with us today. Don't forget to tune in for our next episode. We're going to be talking about some of the craziest sports that have come up that you can bet on with John Lukasik, former Caesars Sportsbook manager. It is going to be a fun one. Don't miss that. And of course, don't forget, subscribe to the show, give us that 5-star rating. And as always, follow @BettingPros on Twitter. Guys, best of luck this weekend with the Poconos, and we will see you next week.